The studio lights were warm, the applause easy, and Faith Hill walked out smiling like she'd done this 1,000 times, which, of course, she had. Kelly Clarkson greeted her with that familiar, big-hearted laugh, the kind that disarms an audience in seconds. They hugged, exchanged a quick joke about Texas roots, and the band hit a friendly riff as Faith settled into the chair. From the outside, it looked like another effortless daytime segment, two powerhouse singers swapping stories, the audience leaning forward, ready to feel included. The conversation started light. They talked about Faith's early days on tour, about balancing motherhood with a career that never really sleeps, about how the road smells the same whether you're 20 or 50. Kelly listened with genuine admiration, nodding, chiming in with her own experiences. The audience laughed when Faith teased her husband's cooking and applauded when Kelly praised Faith's influence on a whole generation of women in country music. Then Kelly gently steered the conversation toward a recent interview Faith had given, a quote that had traveled fast online. It was about creative control, about how women artists were still nudged into neat boxes while their male counterparts were praised for reinvention. Kelly framed it carefully, her tone curious, supportive. "You said something that really resonated," she began, glancing at her notes, "about how expectations don't always change, even when the industry claims it has." Faith nodded. At first, her answer was measured. She spoke about growth, about how every era brings its own challenges, about choosing her battles. Her voice was calm, practiced, the kind that had weathered decades of interviews. The audience murmured approval. Kelly smiled, ready to build on it. But the follow-up came sharper than expected. Kelly, perhaps trying to play devil's advocate, mentioned critics who argued that established artists like Faith already had power, and that newer artists faced steeper climbs. It was meant as a discussion point, a way to widen the lens. Instead, it landed like a spark near dry grass. Something shifted. The room felt tighter. Faith's smile thinned, not disappearing, but changing shape. She took a breath before answering, her eyes lifting briefly toward the lights as if choosing her words with care. "Power isn't a finish line," she said. "It's something you negotiate every single day." Kelly tilted her head, attentive but surprised by the firmness in Faith's tone. The band went quiet. The audience leaned in. Faith continued, explaining that longevity didn't erase resistance, it often made it subtler. She spoke about meetings where decisions were framed as concern, about praise that came with invisible boundaries. Her words were precise, not angry, but undeniably pointed. The applause that followed was hesitant, scattered. Kelly tried to soften the moment with a joke, something about how both of them knew what it was like to be underestimated. She laughed lightly, inviting the room to breathe again. But Faith didn't laugh this time. She nodded, appreciative, yet clearly not finished. "Being grateful doesn't mean being silent," Faith said. Her voice stayed even, but there was an edge now, the kind that comes from years of swallowing thoughts and finally deciding not to. She talked about how women were praised for being agreeable, for keeping things easy, and how that expectation could become its own kind of cage. A few audience members clapped, louder than before. Others shifted in their seats. Kelly's smile tightened, her instincts pulling her between host and peer. She asked another question, trying to redirect, about mentorship, about lifting others up. It was a safe path, but Faith seemed to hear it as a sidestep. "Mentorship matters," Faith replied, "but so does honesty." She paused, then added, "And honesty isn't always comfortable on a couch like this." The words hung there. Not accusatory, not loud, just unmistakably present. Kelly inhaled, choosing her response carefully. She acknowledged the point, emphasizing that the show aimed to create space for real conversations. She gestured toward the audience, toward the cameras, reminding everyone that millions were watching. Her tone stayed warm, but there was a new seriousness underneath. Faith leaned back slightly, crossing her ankles, her posture composed. "Then let's be real," she said. She spoke about how narratives were shaped in bite-sized clips, how women were labeled difficult the moment they pushed back. She wasn't naming names, but the implication felt close enough to touch. The audience reaction split the room, some applause, some uneasy silence. A producer near the stage glanced toward another, their whispers barely concealed. The bandleader looked at Kelly, waiting for a cue that didn't come. Kelly tried again to bring balance, suggesting that progress often came through collaboration rather than confrontation. It was a reasonable point, delivered with respect. But Faith shook her head gently. Collaboration requires equal footing, she said. And sometimes that's what we're still fighting for. The temperature in the studio had changed. What began as a friendly chat now felt like a live wire. Kelly's training kicked in. She thanked Faith for her honesty, for trusting the space. She suggested a break, her voice brightening just enough to sound routine. The applause cue flashed, and the audience responded, unsure whether they were applauding a powerful moment or bracing for what came next. As the cameras pulled back slightly, Faith adjusted her microphone, her expression calm but resolute. Whatever came after the break, it was clear this conversation had already crossed a line, from polished promotion into something raw, something that couldn't be smoothed over with a song or a smile. When the show returned from the break, the energy was noticeably different. The applause came on cue, but it lacked the earlier ease, like hands clapping because the light told them to. Kelly re-entered with her practiced brightness, thanking everyone for sticking around, her voice warm but measured. Faith sat where she'd been, posture straight, hands folded loosely in her lap. She looked calm, almost serene, but there was a stillness to her that suggested she was done performing pleasantries. Kelly opened with a bridge, a gentle attempt to reframe the moment. She spoke about respect, about how conversations could be passionate without becoming divisive. Her words were careful, chosen to steady the room. Faith listened without interrupting, nodding once or twice, eyes focused, attentive. When Kelly finished, she turned the floor back to her guest. Faith smiled, small and controlled. I agree with everything you just said, she began. The audience exhaled, relieved. And that's exactly why I'm saying this. She talked about how respect wasn't just tone, it was substance. How women were often praised for how they said things, not what they said. Her voice never rose, but it carried. Each sentence landed with quiet authority. Kelly responded, acknowledging the point, but adding that daytime television reached a broad audience, one that included people at different stages of understanding. She suggested that messages sometimes needed framing to keep doors open rather than shut them. It was a host's answer, reasonable, diplomatic. Faith's eyes flicked briefly toward the camera, then back to Kelly. Framing can become filtering, she said. And filtering can become erasure. A ripple went through the audience. This time, the applause was louder, more confident. Behind the scenes, tension spiked. A producer stepped closer to the stage, whispering into a headset. Another glanced at the rundown, then at the clock. This wasn't how the segment was supposed to go. Kelly tried to pivot again, asking about Faith's upcoming projects, her music, something concrete to ground the conversation. Faith answered, but briefly, almost dutifully. It was clear her heart wasn't in promotion anymore. The conversation